Hello and welcome to Wicked Women. It's Sunday and I can't believe it's the last Sunday in January. Like, where is it gone? Another birthday, another January, just gone. How's everyone been? How's everyone's week? It's been an interesting week, my end. Some good, some not so good. And I have toothache right now, so bear with me. It is a bit of a cold and rainy night here in South London, and I'm gonna in a while go over to Virginia. And sadly, we're still without my counterpart, my co-host, and she will be back, I think, Val, when she's feeling a lot better. But still sending our love to her. Interesting show tonight. I'll come to that in a minute. Next week's show's interesting, and we've got some great shows coming up, so really looking forward to it. As I said, you're watching Wicked Women, and we're coming from London and Virginia, and it is the last Sunday in January, and we're going to talk about a subject called the Serpent Queen. Now, a little tip here. Years ago, I lived in Calgary, and I had an ex-husband who worked in quite a well-known restaurant in Calgary called Osteria di Medici. Now, I didn't know what that was about. I had no idea. And they kept telling me about this famous Italian family who were quite notorious. And so one day I said, I'm going to do a bit of research on that. And Val and I did cover this topic. Well, we didn't cover it. We sort of went over it in Wicked Queens. And then I watched the series recently, The Serpent Queen, and it was fascinating because I also there's some things about my royal family, the English royal family, that I can look into Catherine de Medici's life and go, that's still going on now. So I just want to welcome everyone that's in the comments. Thank you so much for joining us. I can just about see you because my screen is just about halfway blocked. But anyway, I'm going to bring my counterpart, the lovely Michael, who's going to come and help me tonight. And, you know, kind of like the appeal of us bouncing things off together. And we did a poll recently and we said, do you want us to do more relationship, paranormal, historic? And we got historic and paranormal. So here's your history. Next week's paranormal, and that's your lot. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, I'm going to bring the lovely Michael in. Hello, Michael.
Doing great. Just did my research on this, and it seems like powerful women come out of that part of the world because we still have one that's pretty dominant on the world stage. I cannot never remember her name. She's lovely. I have never seen a woman roll her eyes that hard when men speak. I absolutely love her.
Who's that?
Giorgio. She's I guess you call it like Prime Minister of Italy now. I guess it's still
right. Okay. Yes,
true.
That's right. So lady I've not really checked out much about, but we have gotten the thing about Catherine de Medici, she's a very important, I'm going to bring up the picture actually, so you guys can actually see the lady that we're talking about tonight. Let's bring up her picture. And here we go. She has a wicked smile. And this lady, she's very famous because literally she changed the court of France and it involves Scotland and Ireland and England as well, which was back then a boiling pot of religious arguing. So let's take that off. So let's have a look at Catherine de Medici, and let me tell you something a bit about Catherine, because as I said, I've learned a lot about her. She was never meant to be a queen. She was never meant to marry. She comes from a very, very complicated background. And, you know, if you think about, let's go back to the year 1519, around that time, you have Europe, mainly Catholic, but lots of Protestant wars and people starting to come up and wanting to be Protestant, including or England as it was called, not the United Kingdom back then, but the England with Queen Elizabeth I, because, you know, Mary Tudor had died. When she died, she took the Catholic religion with her, and then became Queen Elizabeth I. And there was never another Catholic monarch, well, not easily, on the UK. So let's have a look at Catherine de Medici. So this lovely lady, as I said, quite the character. It was pronounced Catalina, something like that. But obviously in French, it is Catherine. She was born in April 1519. She was Italian. She was a noble woman of the Medici family and the Queen of France from 1547 she was to 1559. And she was the mother of three kings, Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III, and a cousin to Pope Clement VII. And this lady, it was the first. I mean, if you think about looking back in history, up until that time, most of Europe had been ruled, Michael, by men. They, ruled by men. So it hadn't been ruled by women. Women were not seen to, even Matilda of earlier in England was not allowed to rule the throne. So it was really the Tudors, Mary I and Elizabeth I, that really changed it for England. And Catherine de Medici, she was born in Florence, beautiful part of Italy, to Lorenzo de Medici, who was Duke of Urbino, and his wife, forgive me if that's the wrong spelling, Madeleine de la Tour. And at the age of 14, Catherine married Henry, the second son of King Francis I and Queen Claude of France, who would become Dauphin of France, heir to the throne. That's what they call them. We call them Prince of Wales.
Yes.
Obviously, they call him Dauphin, upon the death of his elder brother. So back then, Michael, and I'm sure you know exactly what I'm going to say to you, women were used for two things: power, breeding, money. And it was like you had to have a dowry, you had to bring something to the marriage, or they weren't interested.
If you can bring money and statue into, it was all about the hierarchy and good breeding. That's how come there was so much inbreeding that was in the royal families, because they wanted to keep the bloodlines pure. So you only had,
were just tools. They really were just tools. And if you couldn't have children, as we've seen with Henry VIII in previous times, if you couldn't produce a boy,
no hairs, no head. That's what it is like. And like I said, and we covered him, and he was, he was kind of an asshole when it comes to that. And now we know through like biology and stuff like that it's the man's responsibility to make the woman have a son.
Yeah.
And he was shit at it. So all these poor women was losing their head, and he just kept going through them. I could only imagine being a woman and somebody comes up and says, "The king wants you for a wife," and you've already seen the parade of all these other women. I'm like, it'd be like, no, that is not the job I want.
I can absolutely see why Elizabeth I never married, because she never, after having seen her mum's head cut off, why the hell would she want to give? Because obviously if she married, someone else would get the power. Catherine had gone through a lot of turbulence in her life. There was a lot of uprising. Her mother died very shortly after she was born. They're not sure if she died from childbirth or an infection, which is very, very common back then. And within a month of her birth, both of her parents had died. And they call it I'm going to try and pronounce this, puerperal fever, which I'm sure is childbirth fever. And then Lorenzo died a month after that, and they're not sure if he died of fever or syphilis. Either one will get you in the end.
Yes.
So literally, she had all this money, and people were like, okay, well, what are we going to do with her? She's an orphan. But she's got a lot of money, and she comes from a family nobility. She could be useful. So the King Francis wanted her to be raised at the French court, and Pope Leo refused, claiming he wanted to marry her to another Medici. And so she kind of went from pillar to post, to this person, to that cult, to that one's house, and even I think she went to a nunnery at one point as well, convent, as you guys would know. And she was cared for by her paternal grandmother for a while. When her grandmother died, she joined her cousins and was then raised by her aunt. So she's in the family, and they were wanting to hold on to her because the money that had been left with her, all the while they had her, she was worth her weight in gold. So you've got a little girl here, which future's already mapped out. It's like, you're going to marry someone. And they married young, from a young age, 14, something like that, even 12. So very, very young. In 1527, the Medici were overthrown in Florence by a faction opposed to the regime of Pope Clement's representative, Cardinal Passerini, and Catherine was taken hostage and placed in a series of convents. The final one was her home for 3 years, and she described this as the happiest time of her entire life. Clement had no choice but to crown Charles of Austria as Holy Roman Emperor in return for his help in retaking the city. In 1529, Charles' troops laid siege to Florence, and as the siege dragged on, voices called for the 10-year-old Catherine to be killed, stripped naked, and chained to the city wall. So you can imagine at 10, you're hearing your voice and your people's voices and names. Bring her out. Let's kill her. Let's strip her naked. And some suggested that she be handed over to the troops to be raped. I mean, that is just horrific.
That is dark, and it kind of sets a tone for the way she carried herself through her life. She thought, if they're going to do this to me, I want to do it to them first. And they kind of set a precedent on how things supposed to be carried out. How do you get power? How do you maintain power? And how do you keep power? Sure. And it was through violence and intimidation and just horrific acts.
I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, as a 10-year-old, to be told, well, first of all, she's lost most of her family. She's kind of being cared for, by a coven. And then the next thing troops have come in. They've killed lots of people. They want the 10-year-old. I can't even imagine how she felt. Eventually, the city surrendered, and the Pope summoned Catherine from her beloved convent to join him in Rome, where he greeted her with open arms and tears in her eyes. And then he was like, right, now we're going to find you a husband.
Yep. It's time to use your womanly wilds to...
Yeah, at 10 years of age. I mean, she's already gone through so much trauma. I mean, we talk about it now, like we're talking about the past. But if you said this about a girl now that had seen both her parents die when she was young, gone from family members that have all died, and then being sent from pillar to post and being threatened with rape and murder and etc., you'd be like, my God, that child should be in therapy for the rest of her life with trauma.
Absolutely. Like I said, she had seen how dark and evil the world was from a very young age and how cruel it could be. And either you adapt and overcome, or you become a victim. And I don't think she was going to be anybody's victim. No, I think she
learned very, very quickly. And I think any woman that marries into a royal family, including the English one in present times, you got to be a strong woman to marry into royalty. There are certain things that are, demanded or expected. And if you don't play the line, you don't come into line, it doesn't go down very well. And Catherine wasn't a beauty. She wasn't a beauty. She was small, very thin. She had delicate features, but she had these big eyes that were quite protruding, which were all the Medici family had the same kind of eyes. And apparently one of the main suitors for her hand was James V of Scotland. Now that's interesting that James V of Scotland wanted to marry an Italian noblewoman, but he wanted mainly the money. I mean, obviously she comes with a massive dowry. Plus he was Catholic, and he wanted to find a Catholic bride, and she had so much power, as in with who her family were in the church. That's why she seemed to be suitable for him.
even back then, if you didn't have money, you could not control your kingdom. That's how you paid your armies to fight wars and maintain, your residence. Like your summer castle, your winter castle, and it all took money to pay the help. And I don't know what the financial situation in Scotland was at the time, but anytime you can, what does it say, stock up your reserves and your coffers,
Yeah.
would be, and still now, they just had the World Economic Forum. People makes alliances for money and power. It still goes on today, and I always said, the G7 huddles together to kind of figure out how they're going to get more money from us, the little people. In the end, and they even did that back in the days. It has been something that has gone on since the beginning of time. Even cavemen. I've got 3 rocks, and I want your 3 rocks.
Well, exactly. And the thing about Scotland, they were arch enemies of England, even though they were ruled by Elizabeth. They had their own king. Elizabeth was certain part of England. They were just, they were always fighting. So he wanted to have a family and money to actually outdo England, because there was always so much war between the two countries. So marrying Catherine de Medici would have brought a lot of money to him. However, he went out to see her twice, and he asked Pope Clement to conclude a marriage, and he turned him down because Francis I of France proposed that his second son, Henry, Duke of Orleans, the Pope jumped at this offer and said, yes, I'm going to allow him to marry Catherine. I'm not sure how Catherine felt about that she's gone from being, with James V of Scotland. Michael, come here. Sorry, my daughter's going crazy and they're over there. We do. James V of Scotland. So, and although they were distantly related, Henry was a prized catch because he was royalty. And so for Medici, it was all about the money. What could give us power? What could give us money? And so that's why she was sent to marry Henry, Duke of Orleans, who was the second son of the king.
Yeah, people don't realize how much power and money that the church controlled back then. The church controlled everything, especially in upper echelons. It was like, oh, I don't think you should marry that person. And, oh, how much, what do you call it, tribute are you going to get back to the church? And, if the families could come together and have a bigger bankroll, was a bigger tribute they could pay to the church. So I kind of see why she did. But, history would have been a lot different if he would have let her marry somebody out of Scotland.
You didn't have much say as a woman. So you would have been told, by the way, you're getting married. This is who you're marrying. We're going to get you ready. And, you didn't have a say. I mean, you could, even if there were some stories with women that would stop eating, and went into hysterical fits because they had to leave everything behind. When you married into a royalty, you left behind your family. You then became part of that family.
Even Catherine the Great, they sent her all the way to Russia, which, that didn't work out good for the Russians. But, like I said, they picked her up, put her on a boat. They met her with a buggy and said, look, this is your home now. Mm-hmm. Welcome to the land of ice and snow. And which, she did well for herself there. But, that is not how most of the stories play out. It's not the fairy tale wedding that everybody portrays. It's not a Disney movie. Like you said, the women had no choice in the matter.
I mean, imagine you've never met him before. And you get out there and you hate him. He might have bad breath. He might smell. He might be not attractive. You might absolutely detest him. But you've got, it's been signed, paperwork's been done, money's been sent. You're going to marry this person whether you like it or not. And she was obviously sent out to France. She was 14 when she married into the French royal family. I mean, that is, that's considering perfect age back then.
And, and you're lucky if they don't have some kind of STD or whatever, because syphilis was running wild back then.
100%.
Yeah, I'm like, this young girl, 14 years old, and he's probably a lot older because that's how they did it.
Well, he was actually similar age. He was similar age, which I think was kind of. I think they were both around 14, both around that age. And, the wedding was extravagant. There was lots of displays and gift giving. And Prince Henry danced and jousted, which was very popular to show your bride how vigorous your groom was going to be.
Such a man he could be.
Yeah, the 14-year-old couple left their ball at midnight to perform their nuptial duties. Henry arrived in the bedroom with King Francis, who said how can I put this nicely? He stayed until the marriage was consummated. And that's what would happen. You would go into the bedroom. You would be with your ladies in waiting. He would be put in by his grooms. And then you would have people from the church, both families, the king, and you would have to consummate your marriage, because it was seen that if you were a virgin, then you were broken in by your husband, or you got pregnant that night. So, it had to be seen as consummated. I can't imagine how that must have felt.
Even if she did get pregnant that night, when she gave birth, she had to give birth in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
I found that out here a while back. The royal surgeons would come in, and the whole court would be around, and the poor woman would be, beating the ass out, giving birth, which, I've saw childbirth. Ain't nothing pretty about it. You know what I'm saying? It's traumatic.
But I mean, to go from your wedding night to being, I can't imagine. You and I both been married. Can you imagine having to do that? Although, and
your in-laws.
Sorry, go.
I said in front of your in-laws.
Yeah, imagine it. Apparently, the King Francis was supposed to have said that his son had shown valor in the joust in bed. And the Pope visited the newlyweds in bed the next morning and added his blessing to the night's proceedings. Now, this is where you think, okay, she's married. Her duty now is to be a good wife and also to provide an heir. But actually, things didn't go that well, because she saw very little of her husband in the first year of marriage. And she tried very hard to get on with her ladies in waiting. She was intelligent, she was bright, she was keen, and she treated everyone well. And the death of her cousin, her papal cousin, in 1534, undermined her standing in the French court. All of a sudden, she was alone. There was no power coming from behind the church and the Vatican for her. And so they felt obliged to keep her there, but she was supposed to have a baby by now. And that wasn't happening because there was hardly any interaction between them for the first year or so. And that's because, he was not interested in her. Prince Henry was not interested in her as a wife. He had lots of mistresses. And for the first 10 years of their marriage, he'd turn up, do his duty. But they failed to produce any children for 10 years.
She can't do it by herself. She needs a little help, and you can't be spreading the seed all over the kingdom and not with your queen or your wife if you want heirs. Which, that happened a lot, because I seen that thing a while back, just talking about the bastard children of royalty. And there's like a whole group here in the States that can track their lineages back from a bastard child out of royalty, either England or France or whatever. And they're like, we could have a legitimate, say at the crown or at the throne.
Sure.
And I'm like, they did not keep it in-house. They outsourced quite a bit.
I think also as well, like when people only want you for your money, and the fact that you've got the church behind you, you've got that sort of safety. All of a sudden, she's like, oh, God, I haven't got the safety of the church. I haven't produced a kid. My husband's more interested in being with his mistresses. I am in sticky wickets here, sticky ground. In fact, King Francis was supposed to have said, the girl has come to me stark naked, which basically means he'd married his son to nobody. And as his son was off busy having mistresses and not really showing his wife any interest, and when he actually ended up having a illegitimate daughter, which he publicly acknowledged, you can imagine how that went down. It was like, well, hang on a minute, like Henry VIII, Henry had illegitimate children, and he could have kids. But Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn, etc., you can't give me a boy. So when Prince Henry said, actually, I have a daughter, this proved that he was fertile, and that produced a lot of pressure on Catherine to have a kid.
Yeah, but like I said, you can't do it by yourself. But, if you want heirs that are legitimized, sometimes you got to stay at home and do your homework.
Well, it kind of reminds me, though, of Princess Diana in some ways, because when I was doing some research on Catherine, there was very much three of them in this marriage. She wasn't the only one, because one of Prince Henry's mistresses, which we'll come to, she was almost like the queen or the princess, because she had so much power over Henry. So there was a lot of pressure on Catherine. You've got to have a kid. If you don't have a child, you're no good to us. We're gonna move on. So because I think
they've already got the money.
Yeah. Well, the money that she came with, they'd have held on to. The church would have had some of that, because they keep paying the dowry. They keep paying the dowry. They don't just give it all in one go. They keep paying it. So I think, interestingly enough, they were like, well, unless you produce a child, we're not interested. And this is where some of her black magic Serpent Queen comes into it, because she was like, I'm not getting pregnant. What's going on? In 1536, Henry's older brother Francis caught a chill after a game of tennis, contracted a fever, and died, leaving Henry the heir. Now, Francis had an interesting wife, and we'll come to her in a minute, but she was very well known, I believe, as I'm going to come to that. I'm sure it's Mary Queen of Scots, but I'm trying to get through Catherine because we've got so much to do. But anyway, Catherine was expected to have a kid. She didn't know what to do. So she then looked into other ways of having a child, every known trick in the book, including placing cow dung and ground stag antlers on her source of life and drinking the urine of a mule. I mean,
that's what I have
not heard that
one. And they said part of it was that he was not fully developed or deformed.
Oh, they weren't doing it right or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's like they said he had it was not a correct shaped phallus.
Apparently they had to get someone to help them because they weren't doing it right, and they were like, you got to get it in, you got to get it here, right? But I can't imagine putting cow dung and ground stag's antlers on your source of life. What an amazing name for it. But eventually it did work, and on the 19th of January,
way to get a UTI.
Yeah. On the 19th of January, she at last gave birth to a son named after King Francis. So she's cool now. She's had a kid. It's a boy. She's all right.
Yeah, big weight off of her shoulders.
It's a bit like the Princess Diana. She had Prince William.
Yep.
But a spare is always needed. And so after this pregnancy, she had no trouble getting pregnant again. And she owed a lot of her change of fortune, Michael, quite rightly, as you were saying, to the physician Jean Fennel, who allegedly noticed slight abnormalities in the couple's sexual organs and advised them how to solve the problem. I'd like to know how he did that, but he denied ever providing such advice. Interesting.
Yeah, because
What I'm doing is wrong.
if you speak out of turn back then, could have cost you your head.
Yeah.
Because only thing it's got to do is say, well, this person is defaming my manhood, and like I said, they even jousted the day of the wedding to show how much of a man he was. In
Well,
anything that you take away from his masculine vibe that he puts out, and if you come back and say, look, he's got a deformed penis, he don't know what he's doing. I'm surprised he's even got a wife, much less a mistress. It could have been his head. Doctor or no doctor, that there would have been no reprieve for that, because that would have been like that would probably been one of the worst insults that a doctor could have gave a royal man that was trying to have heirs to the throne.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking at what was wrong there. I mean, the thing is, it doesn't help that just because you're young doesn't mean you're going to conceive and have kids.
No, she probably wasn't fully developed as a woman to even get pregnant at 14.
And having a congenital, abnormality doesn't actually help either.
No.
But I mean, and if you're thinking about it, once she's had this child, Catherine is like, I'm good. I've got this child. But she went on, I believe, to have 8 children. Eight.
After she got out the door, boy, out the gate, then she was good. After she figured out how to do it.
Yeah, 5 of whom survived infancy. But unfortunately, she had a really bad pregnancy right at the end, which we'll come to in a minute, because that's quite sad. But anyway, he's got a mistress, and I want to look at this mistress, Diane de Poitiers, and I'm going to bring up a lovely picture of her. She's an interesting lady. Where is she? Is this her? First of all, this is Catherine de Medici's husband. Isn't he a fine-looking soul?
He looks like what's the guy that made the telescope? Leonardo da Vinci.
And this is Diane. This is the mistress of the king. Now, she was slightly older. She was actually related slightly to Catherine de Medici. She was slightly older, but she had incredible power over him, so much so that he was known to sit on her lap and discuss the problems of France, stroking her breasts in the king's court meetings. I mean, that's a lot of power. He absolutely adored Diane, and that must have been so hard for Catherine, because it's a bit like the Camilla Diana situation.
Absolutely.
There's 3 of us in this marriage, so it's a bit crowded.
Like I said, I've always felt for her, because she had to be the virgin bride to give heirs to King Charles. And I never did think that they treated her right. But no. I do see a lot of Catherine. When I see Catherine, I see a lot of Diane in her. And the other one, like I said before on this show, she's kind of the revenge of burning the White House down in 1812. The one that married Harry.
I think the thing about a mistress is that one thing we've known about mistresses, because actually the King of England actually married his mistress, if I can say that, because he did, and a few kings of England married their mistresses. But Diane was a French noblewoman, and she had a lot of power over King Henry II.
What was the king that married the American actress that they made him give up the throne?
Are you talking about King Edward? I think it was
Edward. Might have been King Edward.
Edward VII, or was it Edward VIII? One of the two.
I can't remember, but it was
Simpson. Yeah, Mrs. Simpson.
Because they told him, either pick your crown or pick the woman, and he's like, "You can have the crown. I'm going to go do this over here."
The thing is, she was actually I think she was a Catholic, and she'd been married and divorced a couple of times. That was never going to work. She was past childbearing age as well. So Diane was born on the 9th of January. She was a good Capricorn. And she was a very pretty woman. And she knew how to use that beauty. She always wore black and white after her husband died in 1531. And that was the colors she wore for the rest of her life. And she would always have the symbolic colors of the sides of the moon, and playing on her name, which is derived from the Roman moon goddess. She had a keen interest in financial matters, and she managed to retain her late husband's money and property, and challenged in court the obligation to return any of her late husband's appendages. So King Francis I allowed Diane to manage her inherited estates without the supervision of a male guardian, which is absolutely amazing back then.
Yeah, I was going to say that is actually very, very unheard of.
It was. And, it was like, the fact that she was even allowed to keep that, the money and property. But I think
it makes you wonder what's the saying? What did she know on, and who she knew it on? She had.
Wouldn't have been afraid, Diane, to use her womanly wiles. That's for sure, because that's what women had back then. I mean, if you didn't have money,
all they had,
and you didn't have power, you had to use your womanly wiles. You had to be intelligent. If you were intelligent, you probably kept your head. But listening to Diane and reading about her, she was the older woman. Now, how many relationships do you know, Michael, in latter day? Younger men, older women.
Like I said, I've told my story. Like I said, I learned a lot from older women. They know what they want. They know how to get it. And
sure.
Like I said, it's very easy for an older woman to train a younger guy. And I think that's a lot of what she did to him. Was she knew, well, she had been around the block per se, and she knew what it took to keep men interested and engaged.
Consider she was 35 and he was 15.
Oh, she played with him like Play-Doh.
That is a hell of an age gap. Even back then, like she was 35 when she became his mistress and he was 15. And so, to be honest, she knew that Henry had to have children. She knew that his wife was Catherine. And she'd encouraged him, go and get her pregnant. You've got to have a child. You can't have a child by me. Go and get her pregnant. She'd encourage him to go to the royal bedroom and try and, but she ruled him. At the end of the day, Catherine must have felt, and I know from reading about her life, she felt like she was in the shadow all the time of Diane. She felt like, even though she was the princess and now the mother of the future king, she felt like she was in the background. And he would listen to the mistress and he would never not listen to his wife. And that must have had a hell of a lot of pressure on her. Again, more pressure.
That's like that psychological scarring that we was talking about a couple shows back. And it's like, she sees this older woman that has all of these worldly experiences and all of this knowledge on how to get what she wants. She's been in court forever. And you're like 15, 16 years old. You're not going to be able to compete with that kind of treachery and, I'm trying to think the word here. You know what I'm saying? She knew how the wheels turned behind the throne, behind the power. And here's poor Catherine, she's coming in. Parents are dead. She's basically an orphan raised.
Church is gone. Right.
And the church and everything has passed her off. And now she is basically competing with a grown ass woman that has been there, done that, ticked it off.
Distantly related to her as well.
And
that's enough. That's a kick in the teeth.
And, and they did it openly. So that right there tells, if you screw around, you can be the odd one out.
But as a king or a prince, I mean, obviously he was allowed to have as many mistresses as he wanted. And I think Diane knew. She was actually said to bathe in gold and drink a gold liquid to keep her skin young. She was supposed to be very beautiful, very sexy, very sensual, very touchy-feely. And he would, turn to her and say, what do you think? What's your... And his advisors were so frustrated. They're like, why are you asking her? We're here to advise you. And Catherine did something very, very clever. She took a step back. She kept her mouth shut and she was very quiet and supportive and sweet. And that probably is what kept her.
Kept her head. Yeah. That's what kept her head. But could you imagine? Your job is to give the future king or whatever all of this advice. And he's got this older woman that has taught him, what's the saying that we say here? She made a man out of him.
She taught him the ways of the world.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, You're sitting over here. He's sitting on her lap, caressing her breast during the meeting, which now would be an HR nightmare. Say, what are you
Sure.
doing? I'm just over here taking care of stress, take care of,
In front of his wife, because his wife
yeah,
would be on the council as
yeah,
well. That would be a massive slap in
yeah,
there. So all the while, this woman, Catherine, is building to become the woman that she eventually did, which
yeah.
was like, I am not going to have the piss taken out of me, because I've had it
Mhm.
taken out of me by so many people. But
By the
Diane,
world.
she remained Henry's lifelong companion, and was for the next 25 years, 25.
Mm.
And that makes her almost 60. She was one of the most powerful women in France. I cannot believe how that must have been for Catherine. 25 years of putting up with this other woman. That would have driven me insane. I'd have had to poison her.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of that, that's what I was reading over here. It said the method she employed to maintain power for herself and her sons during the turbulent 16th century French war over religion. It said that she used poison, dark arts, and flying squadrons of female spies to destroy her enemies. It's funny that you said poison. You know what I'm saying? She's lucky she didn't get poisoned, because this woman was known for her. This reason they call her the Serpent Queen, because she was not afraid to go dark. Really,
Eventually,
really.
she was, well, she had to. I mean, the thing is, if you think about it, you've got to use cunning, you've got to
Yeah,
plot, you've got to have your ear everywhere, you've got to have your spies everywhere, because you've always got to be
yeah,
one step ahead. You've got to know what's going on. And even though she's married to now the future king,
yeah,
he was in love with another woman, like Camilla, like Diana, Prince
yeah,
Charles. They were in love with another woman. So really, you're only there for one thing only. You're the wife. I've had to marry you. We've got children. You've done your job.
yeah.
And for now,
So
Diane
it's one of
actually
them
has
things.
power.
It's one of them. It's like, sit down, shut up, enjoy the position you got, or it could be taken away.
Mm.
If you raise too much of a fuss, or if you stomp your feet and say, "Look, you can't see her anymore," she knew who was going to be out, and it wasn't going to be Diane. It was going to be her.
But
Because
I think that
we talked about.
Diane was also very cunning, because she knew that she would she actually helped get them she also helped them conceive. She encouraged him, as I said, to go to the bedchamber frequently, because she was worried that if that marriage failed and he married a younger and more enticing wife, she would be out of her
Oh yeah,
position. So Catherine was no threat to her, even with heirs, because Diane was secured as the king's affection. In fact, this woman was so adored by Henry. She was, and she had a very good, sharp intellect. She wrote most of his official letters, and she would they would be signed jointly with Henry and Diane. Henry and Diane, his mistress,
mistress, not his wife.
not the wife. And she was also in charge of the education of Henry and Catherine's children, and gave orders to how they were going to be brought up. She raised a lot of Catherine's children as if they were their own. I can't even imagine. She had the crown jewels. She even wore the crown jewels. So she was the Queen of France in everything but name. And he gave her a beautiful property, which was royal property, which Catherine had desperately wanted. And the king said, as long as he lived, it would belong to Diane. So obviously, this is a situation now which is a breeding pot. And at this time in France, you've also got the ongoing war of the Catholics and the Protestants, like the Protestants wanting to get rid of the Catholic rule. And, it was a time of much unrest. And being the fact that they were Catholic, the French royal family, but knowing that there was this big Protestant turning, England was Protestant, the Netherlands was Protestant, there was more and more turning to that religion. It was also a very unrestful time. There was a lot of murders, a lot of killing, a lot of arguing.
You
And
could go to bed in power and wake up being in the
yeah,
dungeon. Yeah, it was that one thing they had to do was storm your stronghold. And if there's enough unhappy peasants,
Well, exactly. And I think Catherine felt as well that, you know, some say about her being the dark art, she was going to make sure that her sons, no matter what, came to the throne. And when Henry II did a jousting tournament, he was hit and it went into his eye, into his brain, and it splintered. And apparently his injuries were so horrific. Diane and Catherine fainted. Now, he actually lived. I cannot believe that Henry II lived after he had his eye and brain. And apparently they didn't know what to do. They didn't know about how to get the joust out of his brain, because they knew if they took it out, it's how he was going to die. So what they suggested was that they went down to the prisons and find some prisoners and actually do the same injury to them. Can you imagine it? You're downstairs in the prison, it's bad enough, and then they come down and go, you and you, right, we're going to use you. And they did practice on them to see how they could remove it from the king's brain and his eye without actually killing him. And they actually did remove it. And for a while he did live. I mean, I can't even imagine how painful that was.
Yeah, I remember that he was like horrifically wounded doing that.
It was. Yeah, he was horrifically wounded. And I think he lost his hearing, he lost his sight, he became unable to speak. And in the end, slowly his brain was dying. And there was, the pain he must have been in. Me personally, I think I might have just said to him, just take me out, because
of course there was a lot of fun. Now we know there's a lot of frontal lobe damage, which controls personality, speech, and all that. So
and also for Diane, when the king, she knew the king was going to die, she knew her power was going pretty quick, because at the end of the day, he was severely wounded. And when he was on this jousting tournament, Henry II, he actually wore Diane's favor, not his wife's. Can you believe that?
Karma's a bitch, ain't it?
So, Catherine must have felt, when that happened, because she knew the moment he died, she would have control, of which she did. And in fact, when he was injured, she restricted access to Diane and said, no, you're not coming in the bedchambers. This is a family thing. And she kept her out. And Diane knew that she couldn't push it, because if the king was to die, she wouldn't have time to pack her bags, which of course is exactly what did happen. Because the moment he died, Henry II died, Catherine was now a political advisor to her eldest son, Francis II of France. And so one of the first things she did, which I just take my hat off to this woman, she went and made sure that she got the best properties back, including the one that she wanted from Diane. She took away her crown jewels. She kicked her out onto her knees. And I love it, because she's had to wait almost 25 years to do that. Good on her.
What is they say? Revenge is a dish best served cold. And can you imagine how many nights that she just lay there and loathed this woman and thought one day, one day the tides will turn. And when it did, it went from the penthouse to the outhouse real quick. And it's like she went from having the king's ear and favor to, I guess she still had her money from her late husband. But
that's a pretty horrible thing, though, isn't it? Knowing that you've got to wait for your husband to die to take power and have control. And now for 25 years, if you even lived that long back then, even lived that long, because infection was rife, illness was rife, they had really brutal and cruel and,
medieval medical treatment. Yeah.
So the fact that she actually lived that long to take care of her children and gain control was absolutely amazing. And the fact that I just wanted to say, one of her last children, Catherine was pregnant with twin girls, and she couldn't pass them now, because nowadays you'd have a cesarean and have them taken out. And they had to make a decision to because she wasn't going to make it. And obviously having 8 children, they weren't that worried about probably 2 more. So they said, like, you're going to have to make a decision. And they had to break one of the baby's legs in the womb, inside Catherine, to actually get her to pass this child, which I cannot imagine. You're giving birth and you're hearing them break, and feeling the pain. And she had these 2 daughters, Joan and Victoria. Joan died, sadly, no chance of survival. And Victoria died about 10 days later. Really, really sad. So she, that was quite horrific for her. But I mean, now she's going to be regent. I mean, almost in name. And certainly in power, because her son is young. He's only 10. So I'm just looking here with so Francis II of France, and that's an interesting one because that's where we bring in quite a few things there. What do you think, though, Michael? How brutal is it to have had to do that to a woman, to break your children's legs inside of you when you're giving birth to them?
I'm sitting here, it's mind blowing. Like I said, I've never pulled a baby from one, but being on a farm growing up, I have seen the bull calves and horses and stuff like that, with the ropes and you tie it around the feet and you pull. So I can only imagine having that done to a woman, because like I said, it's pretty horrific looking, and it sits with you to see it done. So like livestock animals, but to have that done to a queen, the one that's supposed to get the best medical attention, she's supposed to have the best of all of this. And that is a very, very barbaric act.
Yeah.
And like I said, and it wasn't like she had the privacy to sit in her own chambers and have it done. Like I said, every time a baby come out of the queen, they had an audience. They'd have all of the royal advisors, all of the dukes and duchesses. And it was like a big spectacle to make sure that the baby that they presented to the populace was from the queen. They almost had to see it come out of her person.
I mean, you're giving birth, you're in that much pain. You almost like do anything to stop it. So the fact that she survived all that, she survived the mistress, she's come from this background, you can see that she's building up in character, as in, I'm going to take control and I'm going to be, through my sons, I'm going to be in a position of power. So when Francis II came to the throne, he was 15 when he came. And he was married to quite a famous woman. Everyone in England will probably know, Mary, Queen of Scots, who obviously is notorious of having a long and drawn-out battle with Queen Elizabeth I of England. They were both cousins, both came from Tudors. And
very deep hatred.
Yeah, I mean, Mary, Queen of Scots was Catholic, and Elizabeth being Protestant. So there was a lot of she was arranged to marry the young Francis from a young age, and she was sent from France. I mean, the fact that Scotland sent their only heir to over to France was a big thing. So they got married. He married Mary, Queen of Scots, quite young. And he was married to her until his death in 1560. Now, Francis II, most of Catherine's children, and this is probably due to the age they were in, they were weakly sick. They weren't well children. He was quite an ill kid. They're not sure if he had tuberculosis and other such issues, but he had quite a lot of ill health. And he married Mary, Queen of Scots, who was so determined to bring and make sure that France stayed Catholic, Scotland stayed Catholic. She was she was just devout in the Catholic religion. There was no room for anything else. And she felt like very strongly that if you were not Catholic, then you were a heathen. And there's only really one way for you to go.
Yeah, there was only one cure for that, and it was at the gallows. She was, like I said, that I know I have read in the past that there was a long hatred between them. And I don't know, who's just everywhere you went back then, there was treachery afoot.
Yeah.
people was plotting and scheming for more power and
Especially the
more
church.
position. Yeah. And that's why I tell people, the dark history of the church and how much power that these clergymen had. Only thing they had to do was tell the people, well, God came to me and told me that you need to do this. Then if you don't do that, then they mark you as a heathen or not being devout enough to follow your religious, what's the word I'm looking for? Your religious guidance that's given to you from a man of the cloth or a man of God. And so then if you don't do that, you lose favor of the church, and the church can, they controlled all of the, I guess, mass media back then.
God, absolutely. I mean, it's like you would be blackmailed as well. Like, you and also you're going against God's word. How dare you? And I also
say now, when the king got crowned, it's like you're appointed on this stone by the goodness of God. And it still goes on to this day. But it was even more back then, because every Sunday or every time they had service, the clergyman would put out the message, either pro, family that's in charge, or anti. So yeah.
I almost feel like this family was cursed, and there is this kind of thing about the de Medicis, that they were cursed. So I mean, Francis II, he died very young. After only 17 months on the throne, he died from an ear condition, which they actually think could have been meningitis, or an infection that went to an abscess of the brain. So he would have been in an incredibly lot of pain as well. When he died childless, his younger brother Charles, who was only 10 years old, succeeded him. And on the 21st of December, the court and council named Catherine de Medici regent of France. She's done it. She's regent of France. She controls France. So she's gone from waiting in the background the whole time to going, I got it, through my child. And she didn't really get on with Mary, Queen of Scots, and she arranged for her to go back to Scotland pretty quick, I have to say, because Mary Stuart wanted to hang around and take control of France and keep it Catholic, maybe marry the younger brother, but unfortunately that was not going to happen. So she was booted back to Scotland, much to Scotland's desire.
Catherine said, nope, not here. Like I said, this
Bye.
poor girl, she had waited so long. She had a woman twice her age rubbed in her face, to the point of almost, being kicked out of the royal family. I wouldn't let nobody come in and take, this woman had been waiting for over 2 decades.
Yeah, she's like, it's mine.
But that goes back to, what are you willing to do to keep power and maintain your position? And I'm like, I don't blame her. I'm saying, you got some, she'd already played second fiddle to one woman. And in her mind, she's probably thinking, like, who's this bitch? Is she going to come over here? She's not even French and try to run France after I've been sitting here waiting, taking my, my bumps and my lumps.
And now she's in control, because it's the same over here. Like, obviously, if you have a young child and they become king or queen, they have to have a regent until they become a set age. And she made sure through her son, Charles IX, that she was the power behind the throne. And, in Charles' reign, there was so much decades of tension between Protestants and Catholics. Civil and religious war was breaking out. And he tried in his reign to broker peace between them. He even arranged his marriage of his sister, Margaret, to Henry III of Navarre, a Protestant nobleman, to try and ease the peace between the Catholics and the Protestants, to no avail, because, the Catholic Church has always had so much power. It demanded so much of your country, and in money and in submission. You had so many saints, you had to pay so much money. And so England was almost bankrupt sometimes, as these other countries were, because you had to keep the Pope and the church and Rome happy.
That's like the Knights Templar. They had so much money that the King of France basically said, that's where you get people, Friday the 13th massacre, is the St. Valentine's Day massacres. They had borrowed so much money to fight all these wars instead of paying it back. He said, "We'll just name them all heretics and burn them at the stake." I've been to Vatican City. Vatican City is
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's running. I was going to say, there's no denying the wealth that's in the Catholic Church and the power. And every time that I see, a president who comes in, it's not as much nowadays as it used to be. They say, "Oh, he's Baptist or he's Catholic,"
Sure.
like the Kennedys, devout Catholics, RFK, JFK.
And I think that's why in the UK, you cannot, if you're a Catholic, although they changed it now, but you cannot come to the throne. You can't be king or queen if you're a Catholic. I think in Catherine's son, Charles, in his reign, everyone remembers the massacre of St. Bartholomew, because it really blighted his reign, because all the time, there were so many fights and massacres going on between the Protestants and the Catholics, and they were trying, including Catherine, trying to bring peace to everyone. And there was, it's such a big story, so I'm going to abbreviate it, but people have probably heard of the Huguenots. They were very much a Protestant group who wanted to stamp out most of the Catholics, and they were growing in power. They had a lot of weapons, they had a lot of support, they had a lot of money given to them. And eventually there was a massacre where a lot of them were stabbed, killed, drowned, any way to get rid of them. And that kind of blighted his reign, because it was seen as the worst of the century's religious massacres. And it made that, on Protestant minds, the Catholics were bloody and treacherous people.
Oppressors,
Sorry, people talk about the massacre of St. Bartholomew's even to this day, how bloody it was.
Yeah, like I said, I pulled up my notes over here. It said that so basically concreted her image as a dangerous, heartless figure. They said this woman has no soul. If she could do all of this, it solidified her.
Some say that she arranged it. Some say that Catherine had a hand in it, and she arranged for them to be taken out, because it was almost like what they wanted was to Charles to give up his regency to them. And he actually did sign to give his regency up, but then the massacre happened and they all got they all got killed and they all died, and basically he never had to give up his regency. So I do wonder if there were unseen hands involved in that actually did take him out.
She ain't going to give up her power, and it's not really a rumor if it's true, but back then, like I said, with the countless spies that she knew she had her pulse on the crowd, and she knew that he was going to be
protecting her family, also protecting her children. She, one thing I wanted to add, Catherine, after Henry's death, her husband, she wore black, and she wanted to be known as not the Dowager Queen. She wanted to be known as the Queen Mother, very early title of that. She always wore black, and she was very powerful in that attire. She reminds me almost of King Henry VIII's grandmother. She always wore black, and she was always in Henry VII's ear. She reminds me very much of her, because most of Charles' decisions were influenced by his mother. And so he would ask her, someone would ask him, what do you think, to do? And he would look at his mother. But this massacre haunted Charles for the rest of his life. And they suggest over the years that maybe this is what caused his physical and mental health to deteriorate.
Because he went mad, didn't he? Didn't he go
mad?
He
had tuberculosis. He died of tuberculosis, which was rife, without any child. And he was actually was a very promising king, but unfortunately he was yet again weak in body. And when he died, he was succeeded by his brother Henry III. Now, Henry III is a very different king. So now Catherine's lost 2 of her sons. 2 of them have gone. She's got 1 left. And there's only an illegitimate heir. There's no other heirs. So she's now thinking, right, I've only got 1 son left. And that's where Henry III comes into taking over. Very different son, very, very different. He was actually the 4th son of Catherine de Medici, and was not expected to inherit the throne. And they thought he might be good for the Commonwealth. And he refused to sign many articles into law. He believed that the royalty had extreme power. It was all down to them. He was a very, very, even though his mother was in the background, he was old enough to make decisions and didn't need her to be regent anymore. He was also going through fighting against still the wars of religion. He was known to be quite impulsive. He had been in quite a few arguments and a few fights. Some say he killed people. That was never actually proven, but some say he was a very different character, and Catherine did not have the power over him that she had over Charles.
So he was a little bit dark, just like his mom. But you know what I'm saying?
It was a dark, yeah, it's dark.
But that goes back to, you repeat the pattern you see in front of you, like she did. Drag her out, strip her naked, let the soldiers rape her. Then when she got power, she was very heavy-handed with it. And, he's seeing his 2 brothers die. He's thinking, I'm king now. I better keep my shit together, my circle tight. And no wonder he probably ruled with a heavy hand, because he knew what could happen.
Well, he'd seen his brothers go as well. I mean, when you never expected to be king and all of a sudden you are. I mean, he was a very skilled guy. He was fond of fencing. He liked the arts. He was supposed to have homosexual tendencies, which is nothing new back then. His favorite interests were hunting and riding. He had a tendency towards rebelling. He bit a nose off a statue of St. Paul. He threw a book of hours into the fire. And his mother tried to bring him into line as well. Go on.
Oh, but there's a lot of that still goes on today.
Sure.
You have William. William is a very rough, famous, he toes the line. He does everything that is expected of him to do for king and crown. And you got little brother Harry that's moved to America, married Meghan, sued the crown, and just acted up.
Sure.
So I can kind of see, there's kind of a pattern, when you have all of this money and title, but you're not expected to be king-like. From the day William was born from Diane, they knew that one day he would be king.
But you've got to know that when you become king, you've got to have an heir. I mean, you've got to have an heir to keep your dynasty going. But with Henry III, whether he was homosexual or not, he was seen to be and have a lot of parties and be around very effeminate people. Maybe he was. And back then it wouldn't really been frowned on, because it was practiced by so many, although the church would obviously been against it. Now, there was rumors that Henry was going to court Queen Elizabeth I of England. She was 37 by then. And she was expected to marry and produce an heir. And apparently there was a lot of discussions between Elizabeth I, Catherine de Medici, and also Henry to actually get married. But because Elizabeth I had no intention of marrying, she always talked to people to pretend she was going to marry. Maybe I'll play with this one. Maybe I'll toy with this one. She had no intention of ever marrying. And I think that she felt that she would come over, see what he was like. And I think she called him her little frog. I think that was his nickname.
Yeah, I've seen a thing on her that they said that she had some issues that they won't let them do like a royal autopsy on her or something like that, because she could have been, I was trying to think of a nice way to say this on YouTube, but she had both both male and female body
There's
parts.
no proof on that, but apparently that's some of the rumors they put out. There's some of the rumors.
I just saw that, and I'm like, because they said she never married, she was not interested in men that way. And that was, like I said, I'm trying to keep it very respectful to the, crown.
Well, I think Elizabeth I was always seen as a bastard in the eyes of the Catholic Church, because her mother, the marriage had, they believed that Henry was married until Catherine of Aragon's death. He was married to her. They didn't recognize Anne Boleyn, although they recognized Jane Seymour's child, because by then his previous wives were dead. But I think that Elizabeth was known as the whore, the whore's daughter, the bastard. She was not liked, but she had a lot of power. She was Protestant. Yes. She allowed some leniency in the UK to have Catholic and Protestant, but she was known to be predominantly Protestant. And I think that France was still very Catholic at this point, so it was never going to work.
Like I said, I don't know what they are now, because I see the current, like, people like said, me, I'll keep up with world things that go on around me, and but I still see a lot of the arrogance that the French has always been known for, be kind of being snooty or whatever, and
they have their moments, yes,
and you kind of see them, and I can only imagine, because it was probably worse back then when they was the world superpower, because was it England and France had 100-year war because somebody got pissy, and it was somebody's honor got offended.
I mean, how many wars has there been about religions? I mean,
that's what I said.
So many. By 1589, Henry's popularity was pretty much low. Preachers were calling for his assassination and labeling her tyrant, and the people of France and Paris hated him. They had high taxes. There was a lot of corruption. He relied extensively on Italian finances, but what they hated about him most was his alleged sexuality. They really did not like him. And so Catherine was aware that so much was going against her son, which was her last hope of holding on to the crown, to the regency, although she wasn't regent, but he did still rely on her quite a lot. And then in August 1589, Henry III, I'm always drawn to Henry VIII because he's my favorite. Anyone called Henry, I want to go straight there and say the eighth. Henry III was preparing.
Henry the Basset.
I know. He was preparing to attack Paris when a young fanatical Dominican friar carrying false papers was granted access to deliver important documents to the king. The friar gave the king a bundle of papers and stated that he had a secret message to deliver to the king. And the king signaled for his attendants to step back for privacy. And Clement whispered in the king's ear while plunging a knife into his abdomen. At first, the king's wound did not appear fatal, but he, basically, as you can probably guess, back then it was, and he died, and he was basically childless. He was the longest living of Catherine's sons to have become king, and he was also the last as well. And Henry III of Navarre succeeded him. So she's now lost. She's now lost all her sons. What happens to Catherine? Where is she in this? Because now she's on her own. She's lost everything.
All her influence, all of her power behind the throne, all of the good grace or whatever. But I have seen that they said that a lot of the foreign powers was afraid of her. So even if she had got through out of France, it says being Italian in the French court made her an outsider and an easy target for xenophobia propaganda, as portrayed her as sinister.
Yeah.
Even other courts back then seen her as a threat because she was so cunning and she had been through so much, and she had learned to wield power with a very heavy hand and very You know,
I
and
mean,
then
she's supposed to have
yeah,
had an advisor who was into the black arts. She was
yeah,
supposed to go and see him. She was supposed to be well known to go and see him regularly. She very much believed in getting advice from other people. And some say there was a lot of cunning, a lot of black magic, a lot of whispers. Whether that was true or not, I don't know. For a woman who was in, I mean, having said that, if you do black magic, there's always the come back to you
tenfold,
three
tenfold.
times. But
Yeah.
she had a really kind of difficult life, and for someone who was involved in that, she didn't do terribly well. I mean, she had a really difficult life. She also lost her children, the two daughters in the womb. She had to take second place to a mistress. So for someone who was supposed to be a serpent queen who was known to take you out, I do truly believe that this woman had whispers in her ear. She had people that would do things for her. I believe she had power to do it, yes, and I probably think she did do it from time to time, especially.
That's what, like I said, I'm sitting here and I pulled up my notes and I got all my tabs up and over here. It said that she had an interest in astrology and astronometry and alchemy,
Yep.
which twisted rumors of witchcraft consisting of the occult.
Yep.
But if you've seen all this dark stuff, you've seen your parents die.
Yep.
Like I said, I go back to chain her to the wall, let the men have their way with her at 10 years old. She probably went dark pretty quick at an early age. And if you're going to go dark, you might as well go all the way dark. And it sounds like it. It's like I see that.
But also, she was a figurehead to blame. I mean, she's a woman.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah. And back then,
her last son was hated. So quite frankly, and we're abbreviating quite a lot here because there is so much history in the whole Catherine de Medici story. But what I wanted to look at is, why is she called a serpent queen? This is a young girl who's had to fight for everything, who's had to fight for her life quite a few times, has to bend over and take it, and shut her mouth. Because if she didn't shut her mouth, she wouldn't have gone anywhere. She's had to take second place to another woman. She's had to put up with, another woman having complete control, even to the bedroom, of how many times she had sex with her husband. This other woman controlled her children. So if she did take control, if she did do the black arts, it was, I imagine, she saw it as doing the right thing for France and keeping power and peace where it should be.
I think some of it probably would come out of desperation. Everything else she tried, she couldn't get pregnant.
Yeah.
If you get pregnant, you lose your place, you lose your head. They just didn't recycle a woman back then. It's just like, if it had got rid of her, that would have been her life. They would have discarded her quickly.
And also, if you're watching your child, I mean, Henry III was not a good king. He was not a good king, and she watched him do some terrible things. I'm just literally picking up something about here. She tried to advise him, and he ignored her. She was starting to feel unwell while he was still here. But when he ordered the assassinations of his enemies, Henry, Duke of Guise, and Louis, Cardinal of Guise, she said, "What the hell are you doing? This is not." And she's witnessed this horror, and she knew that the French people would never forgive treacherous behavior of a king, and she knew that her son had sealed his own fate. But she had an infection of the lungs, and she really was struggling by certain time to get her breath out, and it believes she died of pleurisy, which is not I mean, these days you can cure that so easily. But it says that it was her life had been shortened by displeasure over her son's deed, and to be honest, she didn't last long after him. And I'm just sort of reading what someone has said about her. And a dark legend has stained her reign and those of her sons due to the fact that none of them put an end to the religious civil wars that raged in France between 1562 and 1598. They also didn't like that she was Italian and that she believed, as you quite rightly said, Michael, in astrology and astronomy. She
Um,
also was good friends with Nostradamus, which
that's
was
what I was going to say. You know,
cool.
you want to talk about drain mouth? Yeah, I was scrolling through my notes, and it's like said Notre Dame led by critics accusing her of practicing black magic and being sneaky or as a snake or slinky like a snake or something. I'm like,
Serpent.
yeah, and I'm like, and that's probably where a lot of it come from is because she was hanging out with these people. There's no better well-known man that practice the art of singing and like all that stuff. And that
And
we're
the fact
still
that she was Italian, I mean, that and
yeah,
and a Catholic. But I also think that
yeah,
she asked Nostradamus for predictions of the future, and I believe she was told that her children, none of them would last long on the throne. But
because Notre Dame still have the books that people read now. It's
yeah, amazing.
it's
I'd
I
love to do a show on Nostradamus.
they're called something like contrails or something another of Notre Dame.
Mm.
And I was looking through here. It's like some more where it said sexist propaganda. Much of the moniker was fueled by contempt of male dictators who distrusted a woman who exercised such significant power through underhanded means rather than open warfare. They would rather you declare open warfare and your armies line up at each other and throw rocks, sticks, and stones and arrows.
And they thought that poison, I mean, you think about it back then, poison was a woman's deadly weapon because it was so quiet and so quick to do that they accused her of poisoning her enemies. But actually, I think she did plot and I think she did lie when needed to protect her sons. And she was, for Italian, she cared a lot about France, and she had to because was her family. These were her sons.
But that goes back to the other Kathleen, like I said, the one who Kathleen Great. She the day she got married, she became Russian. She was a Russian bride back then, and that was her country from then on. In the same way with France, when she was married into France, that became her whole identity. So she had to care for France. You know what I'm saying? Because that was her livelihood. Because she could not just say, if she had said, screw France, I'm leaving, she would have had nothing. They would have took her diary. They would have took all.
As a woman that's been, as a woman being forced to, well, not forced, but I guess you knew that was your job to do. She's married, she's provided children, she's trying to protect her children. As a woman, who wouldn't love power? Who wouldn't love that power? She is a force to be reckoned with. And here on Wicked Women, we love women that are a force to be reckoned with. And Catherine de Medici, whether you see her as the Serpent Queen or whether you see her as a woman who's been painted black by her enemies, like Anne Boleyn was, like Queen Elizabeth was.
Political propaganda. That's what it is. The only time that we're going to be the only time that we'll be political is things that happened in the 1500s. And I do think there's a lot of political propaganda because, like I said, the more I'm scrolling through my notes here, and it says political cunning. As a powerful woman navigating the court dominated by men, she was viewed as a cold, calculating strategist who used manipulating and secrecy to protect her children's claim to the throne. Yeah. So even the man was looking at her like, this woman can't be trusted. She's not openly engaged in this.
When her husband had died, she was then in that court advisory, and she was Italian, and she was seen. They didn't like her because she was Italian anyway. She was a force to be reckoned, from an orphan to queen consort to queen mother. She dramatically influenced French history, and she produced 3 of their kings.
Yeah, in a row. Yeah,
and her grandchildren went on to shape late 16th century politics. And in many ways, like Queen Victoria is supposed to be the grandmother of certain Europe, she was the grandmother of early modern Europe. So Catherine de Medici is a very important, people don't know about her. People, they don't know. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk about her, because I think that she's a woman, a very powerful woman. She tried really hard to protect France, protect her sons. I'm sure she was capable of all kinds of things. Personally, I'd have poisoned that mistress a long time ago. I don't know how she did that.
That's what it said. It said dictator spread rumor that she used her knowledge of herbs and personal flora perfume to poison
That's
her
right.
rivals. One famous myth claims she killed Jane D. Albert with a poisoned gloves. To modern historians note, there's no proof of such claims. But you imagine being so well versed in red to know what poison to put on a glove to touch somebody, because they didn't have the plastic glove or whatever, so you could be poisoning yourself while you poison your rival. That takes some balls. You know what I'm saying?
She
Big.
also she also built a lot of architectural buildings. She bought some. She
Yeah.
really put a lot of money into building a lot of beautiful chateaus, or obviously we call them castles. She had emblems of her love and grief carved into the stonework of all the buildings, and she never ever stopped wearing black, because when she lost her husband, she was like, no, and she held, even though he was in love with Diane, she always, I was just reading here, a small vase can hold so large a heart. Some wonder that when Henry died, and she kicked Diane out, whether Catherine de Medici really did love her husband, whether she did love him, and whether or not whether she was married to him, she accepted her fate. I don't know. I do think she did love him. I do think she did. And I think she spent a lot of money on the arts, leaving reminders of her and Henry's reign. And unfortunately, there was no heir at the end of it. So the de Medicis, certainly that department
that
died
that
out.
that line, water.
It
Yeah,
died as the Tudors did. Let's be honest.
yeah,
When Elizabeth the First went,
yeah,
that was it, pretty much.
yeah. Like I said, I'm seeing some of the thing over here in the corner. And Val said, back in the day, if a woman didn't lay down and roll over for men, or you seemed difficult to deal with, they basically would call you a witch and had their own opinions of you. And that is very true. And a lot of them men was probably intimidated.
Sure.
They were scared of this woman. This woman has so much power. She could told one of her young sons at the age of 10, off with his head. He's a threat to your power.
I think she
He
tried
needs
to
to
keep
go away.
pace, but the link to the occult, which I find kind of fascinating, and I do want to do a show on Nostradamus. She's been labeled a sinister queen for her interest in the occult. Well, let's be honest, so many people
Yeah.
are interested in the occult. Because she couldn't have children so early, there was suspicion that she used witchcraft. And an infertile woman, and in particular an infertile queen, was regarded as unnatural, and a small step from supernatural, obviously, when she suddenly became pregnant. She's also was educated, as you said quite rightly, and she, back then, anything like astrology and astronomy was seen as a satanic activity, which I think is so sad, because so many royals went to astrologers and asked them, is my child going to be born a boy? Is he going to be
all the
successful?
seers? Yeah.
Right?
But I was just flipping through here, and I looked up like other dark queens. Mary the First of England was called Bloody Mary.
Bloody
Then
Mary.
Elizabeth, what was it? Bathory, something other, but they called her the Bloody Countess. Then there was the Mad Queen that was from. It was okay. Her harsh regime. I was trying to see where she was from. It says known for her fierce resistance to European influence, with her 33-year reign characterized by brutal execution and forced labor. So, but yet they give this woman such a bad name when there was people that was doing a whole lot worse.
Well, also don't forget, she's not royal. She's not even a princess. She's a noblewoman. But some believe she was the creator of the Black Mass, a satanic inversion of the traditional Catholic Mass. Although there's no proof to that, she was never formally accused or prosecuted, despite the fact that her reign, which is quite sad, experienced the greatest number of prosecutions for witchcraft in Italy. This lends weight to the suggestion that people were labeled witches simply because they did not act the way a woman would have been expected to act, or simply to suit personal or political agendas. and this might be true for Catherine. She's Italian. She's grown up around astrologers, astronomers. She was intelligent. She used her head. She was very softly spoken. And she was disliked by French subjects who named her that Italian woman.
You don't have to scream when you have that kind of power. When you got the power of the sword, you don't have to be the loudest person in the room.
And I think that's why she's named the Serpent Queen, because of all these rumors. And this is something we wanted to look at her tonight, because I think she is an important, powerful woman of her time. I'm all about recognizing and talking about powerful women, and Elizabeth I, obviously being a Mary Queen of Scots. These other two women, which I will look at another time, but Mary Queen of Scots, very cunning, full of plots, very devious, some could say. Elizabeth I, very cunning, very devious, did what she had to do. These are women that we can look at a later date, but I do want to look at Nostradamus.
Isabella of France. I just seen her name pop up here when I was doing some of the women and whatever, and her name was the She-Wolf of France. Maybe the French was known for having cunning women in their court, which is another whole show.
Well, I think also the French royal court was Catholic, and by now England was Protestant. And there's a stat. When I went to the Vatican a couple of decades ago, there is a statue in the Vatican of a beautiful woman, and she's got the globe underneath her foot, and out of her foot comes a really long thorn, and it goes all the way into the United Kingdom. Yeah. And I remember saying, why did they do that? And they said because England was a thorn in the Roman Vatican side. It was we were and have remained so since. And hopefully, that's the way when you get religion coming into as we are now seeing around the world of all different kinds, and two big religions fighting against each other. It's not pretty. But please check out Catherine de Medici. Even go and watch The Serpent Queen. Very good series. And absolutely watch this. I'm going to bring up the pictures again so people can see who I'm talking about. This is obviously Catherine de Medici. This was Diana, or Diane, the mistress.
The other woman.
And the actress, did I have that picture of the actress who actually portrayed? Did I? No, I didn't. I didn't bring her up. But basically,
being a woman trying to.
It reminded me of Diana and Camilla. Three of us in this marriage. Three of us.
Kind of like history repeats itself.
Yes, it does. We don't learn, do we?
No, but that's like I said. Could you imagine being a woman trying to weave your way through the politics of court?
No.
The two biggest things that starts wars on this planet is politics and religion.
100%.
Okay. And you got both of them in what is supposed to be your domicile, that you lay your head and you rule a country. And and this girl got dropped into that at a very, very young age. And either you adapt to become dark and mean and jaded and cruel, or you get shit on and run over, and you end up getting marched through the street. Even at 10 years old, they wanted to strip her and sexually assault, what I'm saying, and give her to
you must have paid your ladies in waiting really well, because if there were some poisoning going on and a bit of this, that, and the other, they must have been paid their weight in gold. Really hope you guys have enjoyed it. I know it's a different one tonight. Normally we look at all kinds of relationship stuff, but we wanted to do something a bit historical. A lot of people like that. Please read and look up about Catherine de Medici. She was an amazing, remarkable woman. Next week, completely different show. Really looking forward to it. It is a taste of the paranormal with Mark English. We've been waiting for a long time to get Mark on the show, and I finally persuaded him. So he will be on the show next week. That's his book. What's it called again, Michael?
It's called Mark English Paranormal Series, forward by Dr. O'Keefe.
Show me the book.
I'll do my best, but Vanna White or whatever I can do here.
Yeah, Paranormal Surrey, really interesting book. And Mark is full of knowledge and stuff like that.
You can find it on Amazon.
He's a paranormal investigator. He's also got his own YouTube channel, which you can find on YouTube with MARQ, Mark English.
Mark with a Q.
He's definitely worth a follow, but he will be here. So it's going to be a really interesting show. And I'm looking forward to the ones that we've got coming as well. But I wanted to do something different tonight. And also we hope that sooner or later Val will be back with us.
Yes.
Hopefully she'll be feeling better. But if she's not, then the show will go on as far as best as we can. Sometimes we can't always be here. And, we have to take a little break. Apart from that, that's really all the news. That's all the news. We've been running, how long have we been going? An hour and a half. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
I was going to cover seeing some new people in the chat this week, which we always like new faces.
Sure.
Hulk. There's Rapid Dog. He said, men rule the world, women rule the men.
Yeah.
I've been there. But yeah, and then we see Valerie that's come in. I said, we hope she feels better. And Carlene. I was trying to look who else. Steve, Barb.
Steve is so nice that, Steve is regular. And I think it's nice to know that you have a little family, a little following. Yes. It's really nice. And some new people as well. Thank you, Hulk. I did see you for joining here. The thing about when you're talking about history in the past, who is history written by? Who is the past by?
Yeah, history is what wrote by the winners. And like I said, I looked through, and there was women in court that did a lot worse than she did.
Sure.
But they call her a serpent. She was sneaky. She was this and that. She was like, oh, I cannot believe this woman has, outsmarted me. She must be a witch.
Yeah.
She's evil.
And the fact that her reputation, even now, all these hundreds of years later, is still known for being the Serpent Queen. I mean, that is quite a legacy, as I'm sure Princess Diana will have a legacy long after,
yes.
Many years down the line. I mean, look at Queen Camilla. She is not really liked by so many people because of her reputation, and she's got this bad reputation. She's probably a really nice person, who knows? She's probably a really nice person in lots of ways. Maybe she isn't, who knows? But it's like, definitely Henry VII of England, he was ruled by his mother, Henry Tudor. And she's an interesting woman.
UK, so I'm trying to be very, very nice about what I had to say. Get the custom, be like, you said this, and this a mistake. Because right now, and like I said, a lot of times I tell people, I'm very guarded what I say on Wicked Women, because Wendy is in the UK, and they don't have the freedom to express their views like we do.
Oh, well, we do, but we just, some people get pulled up on it. A lot of us don't.
And that really, really breaks my heart, because you've got to be very guarded on what you do. But that is the climate that we live in now. And like I said, and because I'm a huge fan. They always say you got to pick a side, and I was always Team Diane or Diana.
Yes, I was. I got to be honest.
And that's like William and Kate. I would love to see William and Kate take the throne. Harry, I don't know.
Well, I mean, Harry's kind of blotted his copybook in lots of ways. First of all, he married Meghan, but to be honest, writing that book didn't really do him any favors, because they might want to come back into the royal family, and they'll be like, "But what about the book?" Unfortunately, that's and the thing about the royalty throughout Europe, including the UK. It's full of like affairs, treachery, religion, murders, plots. Even now, let's be honest, nobody knows. I mean, there's so many rumors.
There's always
the royal family. So many rumors.
Buckery, but the first time I'd ever heard that, I'm like, because even the king's brother lost title and position.
Yeah.
And can you imagine being the most powerful man in the UK? And they come to you and say, look, you have to do this, or your monarchy will be tarnished.
Well, I know I always call him Prince Charles because he was Prince Charles for so long, but King Charles
Yeah,
was he was he was liked for some of the stuff he did. But to be
yeah,
honest, since he's become king, a lot of people turn around and say, "What have you done? Like,
yeah,
what have you done? We've not seen you out and about." I know he's had cancer and etc., but he seems to be not he's supposed to be the head of the Church of England. He's supposed to promote a lot of
yeah.
things for the Church of England, but he seems to be promoting a lot of other religions right now
Yes,
without
and
actually mentioning anything. But he tends to be promoting, or at least showing more support to them, and he calls himself the king of all faiths, where the Queen would never have done
oh
that.
no,
She
you,
was
you
the
know,
she was the head of the
in
Church of
my-
England, and that was it.
I remember when she passed, and everybody's like, Michael, I was like, she was the longest sitting monarch in history.
Yeah.
She was a Jeep girl. She loved cars. She loved her Yorkies. I said, she even did a cool ass commercial with James Bond for the Super Bowl. I
Yeah.
said, what
Well,
other
very
monarchy
cool.
would,
Patty's there. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? What other monarchy would be like in the whole behind the scenes? She's like, well, I'm the queen. I should have something to say because the queen is not going to just be quiet. The queen made up her own lines.
Although, having said that, looking at Prince, not that we're allowed to call him that anymore, Andrew Mountbatten
Yeah,
Windsor, some
yeah,
may say that she didn't actually do much
no,
where he's concerned. I think the thing about royal family is that now in the UK, the royal family is seen as to do a service. They're there to promote England, to promote do things for charities, promote charities, be seen to be helping, to have great to have this privilege and wealth. You're doing something good for it. And unfortunately, there are people in the royal family that have taken the piss,
yeah,
that aren't as nice as they've made out to be. And
they, they
there are others that are doing their job. Look at William and Catherine and Princess Anne. I mean, God,
yeah,
they're workers.
yeah, like I said, Princess Anne is. I always said, if I was going to sit down behind William and Kate and have a
Yeah,
meal and talk shop, it would be Princess Anne.
sure.
When her
Right.
sister died, and she
Calls a
was the
spade
first
a
one.
spade.
She was the first woman to show up like in military garb
Yeah.
or arte, and they're like, "Oh, you can't do that." She's like, "I'll do what I want," and she took her post.
She
Beside
would have made a good queen, actually.
she's the type. I don't think she's afraid to get her hands dirty. You spout a line
Mm,
and the jerk a knot in your ass. But I've seen her because they had never had a woman take station and guard the
sure.
casket of a fallen monarch,
Yeah.
and did. I'm like, yeah.
Well,
And I see her.
she didn't give her children royal titles. She gave them, calling her daughter Zara was really, really out there. But I think the thing about William, I think when King William comes to the throne,
Yeah,
he will be a very different monarch. Now, obviously, people talk about he has his fingers involved with the world economic
yeah.
side of things. They all do. They're all involved. They're all got their fingers in pies and etc. But I think William is waiting to come to the throne because it says he is going to be making some very sweep changes, and I think he's having to bide his time. And also, don't forget this whole problem with Harry. This is
Yeah,
Charles's son, right? At the end of the
yeah,
day, if people talk about, and there's all sort of conspiracy theories of
yeah,
who is their real father, and
yeah. Because
etc.
I said
etc.
somebody said
And
James Hewitt. Yeah,
people,
that
well,
was in the
because
comments.
he's got red hair, etc. Who knows? I actually think Harry looks a lot like the Duke of Edinburgh when he was young. But I think Prince William will be a very different monarch. And I think who knows if George? I mean, George may decide it's not for him, and Charlotte will come. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people talking about Charlotte will be the next monarch. Who knows? It won't probably be in my lifetime. Who knows? But I think it might be amazing to have another queen.
Oh, the last one was there forever. You imagine being
Yeah.
Prince Charles before he was King Charles. Here's his mother. This
Waiting.
man is getting, yeah. He's like up in his, what is he, 80 years old or something? And it's like, And but he did do some time, I think, in the Navy during the Falklands and stuff.
He did start the Prince's Trust, which is
Yeah.
has helped a lot of youngsters get on the ladder to jobs, and he did the Duchy of Cornwall as well. But the thing is, what blotted Charles's book was Diana and Camilla. Unfortunately, when he became king and people saw Camilla made queen, pretty much 90%, I'd say, of the population probably thought you shouldn't be standing there.
No, like I said, I never thought I would see signs in the UK, not my king, not my queen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit. But I see here in the comments that you got promoted by Dave. He said, I vote for Queen Wendy.
Thank you.
She has a tiara somewhere. I'll find it.
I'm not sure I'd want to be queen. I'm not sure I'd want to be out in the
public light.
In the public eye and everything scrutinated. That would be horrible. I would not like that at all. And I also think as well that the women in the royal family, they get a lot of bad press, like everything they wear, everything they do.
Like Fergie. Yeah, poor Fergie has called
it. Although Fergie has, let's be honest, what's come out to light with the whole Epstein thing is very interesting. But I think Diana, when she died, I think when William comes to throne, because she will be the king's mother, I think you'll see a lot of pictures go back up. I think there'll be a lot more, maybe some more figurines, statues of the king's mother. I think there will be more and more, because she will. And the thing is, Camilla will just be. She won't even be the dowager queen. No. I think because she's got no children. So actually, Diana will be everywhere, because it'll be her grandson or granddaughter and her son that comes to the throne. So really, she has got the last laugh, if I can say that nicely.
Yeah, like I said, we all know what side I fall on. Like I said, I've always told him that's I was Team Diana, and I look at the way he carries himself. He reminds me a lot of his mother.
Yeah,
she was hugging. She went to these countries and hugged sick kids with AIDS before they even knew how it was transmitted.
She was seeing it, but the thing is also, I think, and it's interesting to look at the conspiracy theories around Princess Diana, because there are so many conspiracies about what happened, and we've all got a view, we've all got a point of view. Which is it? This is it? That? I think the saddest thing for me, some say she's still here. Who knows? But I think that the truth is that the royal family, apart from William and Catherine, I don't really see. I know the now Duke of Edinburgh and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, they do quite a lot. Yes. They're out there promoting. Anne's doing a lot promoting. But I think the royal family has a very different feel about it than when the Queen was here, when Diana was here. And I think William he's been told he's waiting and chomping in the bit to make some sweeping changes, and I wonder what they're going to be.
I have an idea, you know what I'm saying? Because it's kind of like Diane's revenge is waiting with William. And to be honest with you, I can't wait to watch.
Well, at least hopefully it'll be in our lifetime as well, because when you have a monarch that is not so young, you know they're not going to be around for so many years, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's older, sick with cancer and stuff like that. So it's do you want to go and see what
that's about? Diana's side had read it. Yes, they did. So this is something I maybe look at a later date around Princess Diana. There's a lot of conspiracies there. She was more royal, they say, than Prince Charles is. She has more blue blood in her than Prince Charles. But
she was a Spencer, right? Yeah,
she was a Spencer. She's very. A friend of mine went to see where she was buried, and he came away with quite an uninteresting view on whether or not she's there or not. Who knows? The thing is, as you said, history And even today, things are lied about. They're written. Social media is full of like little white lies and hidden gestures. Who knows what the real truth is? We're just here to put we're just here to put stuff out and go, this is what we're showing. This is what we're telling. Go out, educate yourself, learn more, see what you think.
Yeah, we're dealing with what we have, the information we have at hand at the time. In 20 years, there might be more information, more ways to inform people to make a better.
I love the series The Crown, because I think the Crown kind of put little snippets of tidbits, into it. And I actually did buy the book, Diana, Her True Story. I have that somewhere. I actually bought that book. I mean, when it came out, it was like, wow. And literally I was out there buying it, and I read that book from cover to cover, and it was so interesting to know that now that obviously Diana was the power behind that book, and she didn't obviously admit that. But yet again, a woman in the royal family didn't lied and plotted and kept things back. Not much difference really has changed from Catherine de Medici's time, apart from the fact that you don't get labeled a witch.
Yeah. Like I said, you got to work with the tools that the universe gives you to work with. And a lot of times the women only had their cunning or their looks or whatever to get them through. Sure. And they really had to go back. Like I said, their womanly wiles, their knowledge of the world and how world worked and how men perceive them.
Yeah.
But after a while, I think she didn't care if I think she used it like a moniker. It's like, if you cross me, you'll end up dead.
I think Diana is an interesting woman to look at. I've never thought about, because there's so much present day stuff and news is changing about Diana, is one of the reasons why we've not sort of looked at her. But I think there's a book that I'm just reading at the moment, interesting book about her, and it's almost like she was taken out, and because a lot of people think she was, we'll never actually know. So we have to, all we do know is that a beautiful woman is no longer with us in public. That's for sure.
Not only beautiful outside, but beautiful inside.
She was beautiful. In fact, a friend of mine actually met her. They worked for an AIDS charity, and they met her. She was doing a lineup and saying hi to everyone, and they said that she had these beautiful blue eyes that literally would, you would lose yourself in them. She knew everybody's name. She made you feel amazing. And she said, I met her and I wasn't a royalist, but by the time I've actually finished, I actually loved her. She was brilliant. So I think it would be interesting to, and I went to one of the hospitals up here recently, and it did say was opened by Princess Diana, or actually Diana, Princess of Wales. I mean, how romantic is that name? Diana, Princess of Wales. What an amazing name to have a legacy.
She didn't pick a lot of like easy going charities either. Landmark. I know
she wanted to go to those that didn't get help, like mental health, like AIDS, like landmines.
I remember seeing her in body armor and a helmet, going into these places where these people was demining these things so these people could farm and grow crops and feed, these children and old people. And I thought, like I said, another set of lady boss, you know what I'm saying? Because I wore body armor and helmets. They're not comfortable. They're hot. They're cumbersome.
Yeah. And she was great.
And she was in the middle of it. And I'm like, that takes a lot. Everybody's like, oh, photo op or whatever. I don't think she was that way, which I know there is photo ops or whatever. I get that shit. It's all about propaganda.
I think it's difficult if it's your mother that you've lost, and you must see all these conspiracy theories about her on the social media, and I'm sure it must get to them at times. But maybe it's someone we look at in the future. Maybe we do a show on Princess Diana.
We know I'm a fan. You know what I'm saying? That was my mom's name, Diana. Everybody's like, oh, that's Diana. She's like, no, it's Diana. And and that's what I tell them. It's Princess Diana.
Well, wasn't it the goddess? What was Diana? Was it the goddess of war?
The goddess of the moon or something.
Or something like that. I just think it's amazing that her sons are very, very different. I mean, Prince Harry has actually been over here recently doing a court case against the Daily Mail, I think it is.
Oh, he's also wanting more like Royal Guard or something.
But maybe he felt like his mother. Maybe he felt when he did that book, it was like, well, it was good enough for mum, be good enough for me. But because it kind of backfired, because Diana had people that didn't like her, though. I know some people that couldn't stand her, and they actually prefer Camilla because they're like, well, Charles really loved Camilla, and Camilla's more down to earth. And I think it's like, what team are you on? Are you on team Camilla, or are you on team Diana? And for me, it will always be team Diana.
AI to the rescue. It says Diana, the Roman goddess of the hunt, the moon, nature, and wild animals, often revered as a protector of the forest and women in childbirth. So, if you're going up on childbirth. Okay, as a daughter of Jupiter and Latona, and twin sister to.
What you reading? Tell me what you're reading.
It's where I just brought it up here. Diana was the twin sister of Apollo. She is strongly associated with chastity and the counterpart to the Greek goddess Athena. She's frequently depicted as a bow and a quiver and accompanied by deers and hunting dogs.
Well, the thing about, if you think about her funeral, her brother said, who was named after the goddess of hunting, she was the most hunted woman on the planet.
She was. That was very true. And all that, and it's, but when you think she can't get any cooler, it said she's accompanied by a stag or a deer and hunting dogs. Like I said, you got your basset there. I've got my pits here. You know what I'm saying?
He's not. I don't know where he is. Oh, he's underneath here.
And like I said, mine was sounding the alarm because, like I said, we're in the middle of ice and snow or whatever. Every time one of the trips go
by, it's rain and damp as usual.
Classic British.
No, you can send that. I'd rather have your weather over here. It was a really different show. As I said, we do occasional history, and I wanted to do Catherine de Medici, but I'm looking forward to next week's show. It will be really good fun. We still got Dwayne to come in February, and also
our Canadian buddy.
Yeah, lots. I'm looking forward to Dwayne coming back. I really am.
Yeah, people asked me about the flag the other day. I was like, look, we have people that watch us in Canada.
Yeah.
Me and Wendy, UK, America. My buddy in Vegas, Latino. I've got the Mexican flag over here.
I can see him,
and we got the Australian over here. And that's what I'm saying, Wicked Women is built for the world. We don't care what nationality you are.
We're a podcast like for women everywhere, and for guys too. Don't get me wrong, we get a lot of guy support as well. And I would say to everybody to like, share, and subscribe. We're really, thanks ever so much for so many people that share, that like, that leave comments. It means a lot to us. And we believe in having a positive platform. Try not to have any negativity. Everyone's allowed an opinion, of course, but it's like, if you're going to be negative, try and make it a positive negativity if you can. The world is already full of too much negativity. I'm going to bring the close the old shop down at 2 hours because it's been a great show. Michael, thank you so much for being a part of it.
But yeah, tell them, what is it? Facebook, Wicked Women at 888 on Facebook.
Yep.
And if you want to interact with me, Wendy, Val, and other little wickeds, that would be an excellent place to do it.
And I also feel as well, we may do the day show. I was just looking at my diary to think when I can actually do an afternoon show, or it'd be a morning show for you guys. But I'm actually looking at it. Let me see what
let me open my diary here, since I have a diary.
I have a diary, darling. Tomorrow, but maybe this week we can squeeze in one in the afternoon. If not, we will do an afternoon.
Mine early morning.
Yeah, be up early morning, my afternoon. I hope everybody has a really good week. Enjoy your it's payday at the end of this week. How amazing is that? Have a really good last week of January. Wherever you are, stay warm, stay safe, take care of yourself and each other. Thank you very much, Steve, for your wonderful comments, and for Carlene and for Dave, Field Guy. I'm just going through Rapid Dog, Hawk, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. I love to see Barbara here. It's so nice when she's joined us, and everybody else that's
sweetheart
in the chat room watching but doesn't want to be made known that they are here. We really do appreciate everyone being here. So thank you very much. Let me just find the music because it's here. I always have this problem. I must bring it out sooner. It's been a very relaxed Wicked Women. Really enjoyed it. I'm going to get ready to go to bed because some of us are at 20 past 11.
Some of us are starting their evening and somebody is finishing their evening.
Exactly. All right, guys. Have a great week. See you next week with Mark English. Have a look for him, MARQ English on YouTube, so you get an idea of who he is. And come and join us next week, 9 o'clock UK, 2 p.m. Mountain, 3 p.m. Central, and 4 Eastern. Is that right?
Yes.
In the end. All right, my darling.
They got it right. Yeah. Me and Dave will have to talk. I'll talk to Dave later, and I'll say, Dave, I had to go on Amazon. I haven't had this.
All right, guys. Have a great week. Talk to you soon. Lots of love.
All right.
Bye.
I love you.